Hello, everyone. This is Kashif Kamran, and my purpose of discussion with all of you today is the new article by the AAA examiner known as Group Audit. Now, I thought it is very important that I should have a word with all of you prior to the December 2020 exams on this very recent article on Group Audit. There is a lot of anxiety, a lot of confusion, and a lot of misunderstanding around this recently introduced article on group audit. So I thought it is very, very important that I come up with a presentation and a lecture on group audit and to guide you about the best possible knowledge you should be having about this subject matter as you prepare yourself for the December 2020 exams. Now, in terms of this recent article, the group audit, I would like to bring clarity to a number of things. Firstly, this recent examining team article focuses on the main aspect of the group audit from the AAA syllabus perspective. Now, we know this group audit has been an integral part of the AAA syllabus. This is not a new topic, right? So you should first understand that when you are preparing yourself for the December 2020 exams, the group audit is an integral part of the syllabus. It is only that the examining team for AAA has written an article on group audit just to provide you a fine tuning and just to provide you that as a student of AAA, you have all the concepts of group audit which your examiner expects from you as a AAA student. So when you read this article will provide you the examiner expectation around the topic known as group audit and what your examiner expects from you. So if you read this article, a very small one, at least you will be able to meet the expectation of the examiner. So this is basically a fine tuning article. This is not a current issue because a lot of students are rating the group audit as a current issue article. No, this is not a current issue article. This is not written on a syllabus area G, which is the current issue. This is written on a subject matter, which is group audit. And this article is just providing you the knowledge of ISA 600, which a student should have appearing for exams in 2020 or 2021. Because group audit is such an integral part of the AAA syllabus and such an integral part of the exam paper. So this is not a new area. This is not a current issue. This is just an article providing you the technical aspects of group audit, which you as a student of AAA should know, irrespective you're appearing for exams in December 2020 or onwards in 2021. Okay, now let's understand something more about group audit. Now, the group audits are frequently examined in the AAA exams and are examinable in a variety of way across many syllabus area. Now, when you're preparing yourself for exams, either you are giving AAA for the first time or you are repeating the AAA paper. You must have seen a lot of time a question on group audit, whether that is a question on group audit set at the planning and risk assessment stage, or whether that is a question on group audit set at the stage of completion and reporting, which is the question number 2. But when you have practiced the past papers, you must have seen a variety of questions on group audit. So you cannot have a lame excuse that I don't know this topic, because if you have properly practiced the past papers, you must have got a very good dimension of group audit. Now, the purpose of my presentation today is to give you the critical aspects of group audit you should be knowing, and more importantly, to understand this very recent article. So when you are preparing yourself for at least the December exams, you are not missing the important points. Candidates are expected to have strong knowledge of the underlying accounting issues arising in a group context in addition to the audit implications. Now, you should have a strong accounting knowledge, which is an underlying factor of the entire AAA paper. We know that for a AAA paper, you should be very strong on your SBR knowledge. And that is the reason it is recommendable that you do your SBR first, followed by the AAA paper. So you should have a strong SBR knowledge. You should have a strong accounting knowledge around the group context. And I will be putting more emphasis on this accounting knowledge in the context of the group later in my presentation. Now, the practice of the past questions on the issues arising in group should be performed in order to enhance understanding of the syllabus content and what the examining team are expecting from candidates' responses. Now, it is essentially important. Practice of the past questions. The more, the better. If you practice the past questions, you will know the exam rigor for group audit. You will know what exactly your examining team expect from you on this subject matter of group audit. So please ensure that you practice the recent past papers. You will see variety of question number one set at the group level, and a group of companies have been examined in the question number one. Now, moving onwards, the accounting knowledge around the group. Now, if you are attempting a question on risk assessment, which is the question number one of the AAA paper, right? And we know at times in the question number one, you find a single company, or at times in a question number one, you find a ABC group or a XYZ group, and you're solving a question on audit risk or risk of material misstatement or business risk, and the company given to you is a group. Now, that doesn't make a big difference till the time the examiner asks you some very particular aspects of group. We have seen some group questions where there was no application of the group accounting standards, and normal accounting standards like IS 10, the IS 16, the IS 20, the IS 21, the IS 36, the IS 37, the IS 38 was tested, or IFRS 2 was tested, but there was no application of the group knowledge, even though the question was set at the group. But there has been certain questions in the past paper where the examiner gives you a group, and in the context of the group, you come across a situation where the parent company acquired a subsidiary during the year, or there is a situation that during the year the parent company disposed of a subsidiary, or during the year the parent company made some investment in an associate, or there was a joint venture arrangement. Now, if there is a particular situation where you have an acquisition, or where you have a disposal of a subsidiary, or where you have a joint venture arrangement, or where you have an associate, now this is where typically you should have a very strong accounting knowledge around group. Now, if you know the IFRS 3, you know the business combination, you know how to account for goodwill. Now, there can be a situation in a group question where there is a goodwill situation, and the goodwill has been wrongly accounted for, or the goodwill has not been impaired, or there is some problem with the way the goodwill has been calculated. So you should have strong knowledge of goodwill accounting. You should know how the goodwill is accounted for, how you recognize goodwill, and how later you review goodwill for impairment. So that could be one special feature of a question on group. And in many past papers, we have seen the examiner focus on at least the goodwill in a question on group, even though examiner doesn't focus on other aspects of the group accounting. So you should have a strong accounting knowledge on IFRS 3, particularly the goodwill accounting, particularly how does the parent company accounts for a merger or an acquisition. Secondly, IFRS 10, the consolidation accounting. You should know the journal rules of consolidation. We have seen past papers where a question has come on group, and the examiner has focused on the accounting treatment of the eliminations of the intercompany balances. Now, you should know the journal rule of elimination. You should know that the intercompany balances, the intercompany payables and receivables are eliminated. So you should have a journal concept of elimination. And if there is a wrong accounting treatment, or if the intercompany balances are not eliminated, you should be capable of identifying the risk of material misstatement and even the unrealized profit. that you should eliminate the unrealized profit. So if you have carefully practiced the past papers, you must have come across situations of goodwill. You must have come across situations of intercompany balances. You must have come across situations of unrealized profit. And moreover, you must have come across a situation where the group has done an investment in an associate, and you should know how to account for an investment in associate, how you recognize an investment in associate in the statement of financial position, and how you present the share of profit or loss from an associate in the statement of comprehensive income. So you should know the equity accounting. You should know how to account for an investment in associate using the equity accounting method. That is the maximum knowledge. And same goes with joint venture, that for joint venture, you should again know the equity accounting method, how you account for an investment in a joint venture. So this is a basic, simple knowledge that you should know around group. Now, in a group question, you can have the other ordinary standards like share-based payments, like the government grant, like impairments, like intangible assets. You can have things like provisions and contingent liabilities. You can have property, plant, and equipment. You can have those normal accounting phenomena. But if the examiner is very particular about the group, he might give you in a case study something about goodwill. He might give you something in the case about the intercompany balances. He might give you something in the case about an investment in associate or a joint venture. So your concept around IFRS 3, 10, 28, and 11 should be very strong. And that is the needed knowledge around the group. So group is not a fear factor, right? You solve a question on group as if you're solving a normal audit risk question. You will follow the same rules of audit risk. You will follow the same rules of risk of material misstatement as you must have attained knowledge of. But what can be extra in the group question? The different accounting standards like IFRS 3, like IFRS 10, like IAS 28 and IFRS 11. That's one extra thing. Or the second extra thing could be that in one of the requirement of the question number 1, the examiner might test you on the knowledge of ISA 600. The examiner might give you 6 marks, 8 marks, or 10 marks on the particular knowledge of the ISA 600, for which the examiner has wrote the article. So the article of the examiner has not been written on IFRS 3 and IFRS 10 and IAS 28 and IFRS 11. That is accounting, and you should have the underlying accounting knowledge. But why has the examiner written this article? The examiner has written the article for ISA 600, that what is the role of the group auditor? What is the role of the group audit engagement partner in the process of group auditing? So the article has been written from the side of auditing, not from accounting knowledge. So I will just be exploring this different aspects of the article written by the examiner. But this is one very important thing, right? Now, moving onwards, the SPR technical articles, such an important resource. Now, you know that the ACCA qualification has designated pages for every paper, like a AAA technical articles, like the SPR technical articles. Now, if you go to the SPR technical articles, there is a technical article written by the SPR examiner, which covers IFRS 3 and 10. And this is such a wonderful article which summarizes the basic knowledge you should have as a AAA student for IFRS 3 and 10. This is such a wonderful article. And this is the hyperlink of the article. And if you go to the SPR technical articles, you will find this article there, which covers IFRS 3 and IFRS 10. And it will hardly take 1 hour to you to read this article, because it is such a straightforward, simple article covering basic knowledge of IFRS 10 and the basic knowledge of goodwill and the accounting for goodwill. So please ensure that you do cover IFRS 3 and 10, and you also do cover IAS 28 from whatever source you have where you are revising the accounting standards. And you also cover the IFRS 11. Okay, the group audit questions. Now, just to give you a realization that this is not the first time that examiner can test a group audit question in terms of knowledge, right? In terms of ISA 600. Uh, when you look at the history of the AAA paper, so many times the examiner has tested the knowledge of ISA 600. So many times the examiner has put 6 to 8 marks on the group knowledge. And I just want to show you some examples of those questions, though some of them are very old questions, but that will give you an idea that this topic has an historical relevance. This is not a new topic. If I start my journey from the questions which are set on the group audit at different stages of the AAA paper, you will find a lot of questions on group audit set in question number 1, which is risk assessment. Because risk assessment is an integral part of your syllabus, an examiner do give you a group of companies in the question number 1. But in some past papers, the examiner has tested knowledge on the group audit, and this is very, very important. The examiner has tested knowledge on group audit. That is, he has tested the knowledge on ISA 600. And the examiner has tested the knowledge on using the work of a component auditor. The examiner has tested the knowledge on what is a significant component. And the examiner has also tested knowledge on the audit procedures on consolidation. Now, when you look at the prior history of the AAA paper, there has been questions in the very early past of the AAA paper which has tested the audit procedures on consolidation. Yes, in the recent past, in the last 2 years, in the last 3 years, or in the last 4 years, we have seen examiner has asked for audit procedures on joint ventures. Examiner has asked for audit procedures on investment in associates. Examiner has asked for audit procedures on goodwill. But in the early past of the AAA paper, the examiner has asked for audit procedures on consolidation even. So it might come back because examiner has covered the audit procedures on consolidation in the recent article. So you should have knowledge of audit procedures. You should have knowledge of what is a significant component. What is the definition of a significant component? It has already been examined. How will the group auditor use the work of a component auditor? And what is the definition of component auditor? Now, this is all the knowledge of ISO 600 where the examiner has written the article. So examiner article is not from the accounting side. The examiner article is from the side of ISA 600. And examiner wants the AAA student to have a sound knowledge of ISA 600. And I think this 4-page article covers every aspect you should know. So I think this article hardly takes 1 hour to read. And after 1 hour, you can have your short notes. And my presentation today will help you with those short notes. And once you have the short notes, you will gain confidence on knowing the knowledge. So attempting a question on risk assessment, that's not difficult, right? You know this. But the only thing you should know in a risk assessment question is the typical standards like IFRS 3, like IFRS 10, like IS 28, like IFRS 11. But what about knowledge? Knowledge is something which you should have. So where will the knowledge come from? The knowledge will come from the article of the examiner, which is on ISA 600, which I will just be sharing with you on the screen shortly. Now, just before that, when I look at the past exam papers, to give you a realization that this has been an historical perspective and starting as early from June 11 paper, such an old paper, but that gives you a realization that group audit has never been out of the syllabus. In the June 11 question number 5, the question number 5 was on reporting at that time, and it was set on Nassau Group. And this question, tested knowledge of audit report around group, including audit procedures on consolidation for 8 marks. So in this question, such an old question, June 11 question number 5 on Nassau Group, there was audit procedures on consolidation for 8 marks. They might come back in 2020 exams. They might come back in 2021 exams. And the examiner has covered these audit procedures in the article. So you should read the article for these audit procedures. So that means there is a history of this topic group audit. This is not a new topic. This is not a new examinable area. This is not a current issue. This is an integral topic of the triple exams. So June 11, question number 5 on the Nassau group. Moving on, June 12, the question number 1 on CS group for 8 marks tested knowledge on the impact of a new subsidiary on planning the individual and group audit. If there is an acquisition of a new subsidiary by the group of which you are the auditor, what impact a new subsidiary will have on your planning for the upcoming audit of the group. So if you are a group auditor and you know at the planning stage that the group has acquired a new subsidiary, what impact the new subsidiary will have on your planning? How would you consider the new subsidiary in terms of making your planning for the upcoming audit? So that June 12th question number 1 on CS group for 8 marks tested the knowledge on planning, the basics of planning. The June 14 question number 1 on the Adam group tested knowledge of using the work of a component auditor for 8 marks. So see, these are knowledge. And this is all covered in ISA 600 written by the examiner. So June 11, June 12, June 14. You can solve all of them just on the basis of the knowledge you will get from the recent examiner article. That's not the end. December 14, question number 2 was a complete question on evidence set around the Francis group and tested accounting standard knowledge around goodwill and intercompany balances. You know there is a question on evidence which comes in the AAA paper, right? Which asks you for the evidence in the working paper file. This was a question on evidence. And this tested the accounting knowledge of goodwill, IFRS 3, and the intercompany balances. So this was a wonderful question which tested students on the accounting knowledge around group. December 14, question number 2 is still a better question, still not a very old question, somewhere in the middle. Then 2 years later, in December 16, question number 1, there was a ZCG group which specifically tested audit procedures on joint venture for 4 marks. So audit procedures on joint venture for 4 marks. Then in June 17, a question number 2 on Magnolia Group tested professional and quality control issues and including procedures on different components of the group for 25 marks. We know the question number 2 is of 25 marks. And in the June 17 exams, the examiner developed a case on the Magnolia Group, and the Magnolia Group had 3 subsidiaries, and each subsidiary has some ethical and professional issues, some quality control issues. So the question was set on the quality control and professional issues for 25 marks. So examiner can give you the group in the context of professional and quality control issues. Examiner can give you group in the context of evidence. Examiner can give you group in the context of knowledge. Examiner can give you group in the context of the question number 1 on risk. Now after June 17, June 18 question number 1 was on the Bassett group for 8 marks. Tested knowledge of a significant component. Examiner even asked for the definition of a significant component for 8 marks in this 8 marks question. So a lot of times the student even don't know the definition of a significant component and the involvement of the group auditor in the work of the component auditor. What sort of involvement? Now, all these knowledge questions in front of your screen for 8 marks or 6 marks can be easily covered from the reading of the examiner article. And then plus you should have an accounting knowledge. So if I just make a summary for you quickly before I take on the examiner article, there are 2 things which a AAA student should know around group audit, right? Let's put it this way. As a AAA student, you should know 2 things for group audit. Number 1, you should have the accounting knowledge, which is a very essential feature of the entire AAA paper. You should have knowledge of IFRS 3. You should have knowledge of IFRS 10. You should have knowledge of IFRS 11. Plus, you should have knowledge of IS 28. That's one thing. The second thing, you should have knowledge of ISA 600. And you should have this knowledge. And where will you get this knowledge? You will get this knowledge from the recent examiner article on group audit. So you should read this. You should read this article and The maximum time perhaps you will take will be 1 hour or 1.5 hours, because I read this article in like 40 to 35 to 40 minutes. So if you are reading this article, so probably 90 minutes max would be good enough to read through this article. And I will be giving you the way of reading this article shortly. Now, you can revise the accounting knowledge, right? Either you can go to the SPR technical articles on the ACCA website, SPR technical articles on the ACCA website. That's one wonderful source. If you have recently given the SPR paper, then you would have this knowledge definitely. You can go to IFRS Box, which is a very good website, ifrsbox.com, I think. You can search that on Google. You can go to IS Plus, which is a very good site for summaries of the accounting standards, right? Or you have your own resources, whichever you are using currently, right? So even you have the Kaplan book or the BPP book, which covers the accounting knowledge. You can cover them through it. Now, obviously, every student by now knows the resource you must be using for the accounting knowledge. So whichever resource you're using for accounting knowledge, just continue with that. These are just suggestions of areas from where you can take on the accounting knowledge. Okay, so that's the two things, right? And I think that's not plenty. Even with less than 2 weeks remaining from exams, December exams, I think this is a good enough time to go through these two things. Will hardly take 2 to 3 days, and you will be strong on the group audit. Okay, now coming on to the main purpose of my presentation and lecture, which is the recent article by the Examiner on group audit. Let's see what sort of knowledge you should be having from ISA 600. Okay, let's move on. Back to my presentation. Okay, now when I look at the group audit and I look at the recent article, what's the scope of the recent article? What is the examiner trying to tell you in the recent article? The examiner has covered three important areas of ISA 600 in the recent article, and the examiner wants you to have knowledge of those three areas when you are appearing for exams in December or then in 2021. The recent article of the examining team focuses on the following aspect. Now, when you read the article, you will find these as three headings. These are three headings of the article, right? The heading number 1 of the article is determining whether to act as the auditor of the group financial statement. So you have to take a decision as a group auditor that should I act as a group auditor or not. The heading number 2 of the examiner article is communication with the component auditor. How does a group auditor communicate with a component auditor? And from the exam perspective, this is very, very important, because this is an area which has come so regularly in the past paper, that how you have a liaison with the component auditor, how the group auditor connects with the component auditor, and what is the responsibility of a group auditor in context of a component auditor, and what is the responsibility of a component auditor in context of a group auditor. So for me, the heading number 2 is a very, very important heading. Then the heading number 3 in the article, which comes in the last one and a half page of the article, is obtaining sufficient, appropriate audit evidence regarding the components and the consolidation process. So how does a group auditor obtains evidence regarding the components, and number 2, the consolidation process? And in this area, the examiner has covered the procedures on consolidation. And I do believe these procedures are very, very important. They might come in some recent exam settings, either in 2020 or 2021. So point number 2 and point number 3, particularly in the point number 3, the consolidation process procedures. Examiner has not covered the consolidation process from an accounting point of view, right? Examiner has covered the consolidation process in terms of the audit procedures. So how does the group auditor decides to act as a group auditor? Heading number 1. In the heading number 2, how does a group auditor communicates with a component auditor? Number 2. And in the heading number 3, how does the group auditor assures that he has got sufficient appropriate audit evidence about components, and has the consolidation process been fully assured by the group auditor? So 3 headings, and that's the scope of the recent article. So if I just show you now the article around 3 headings. Okay, if I just put the article in front of your screen, which is on the group audit. Just 1 minute. Let me open this article and put this article in front of you. Okay, now right in front of your screen, you can see this article on group audit, which is currently an important subject matter we are going through. Now, this article on group audit right in front of your screen is just a 4-page article. And I think that should not take much time for you to go through. Now, there were 3 headings, right, which I was just guiding you, and 3 important areas which the examiner has covered in this article. Now, if I just take you down and you start reading it, the very first thing the examiner has guided you in this article is about the ISA 600 and the objective of the ISA 600. So this is very important. You should know what is the objective of ISA 600. What does ISA 600 expects from the group auditor? Examiner has mentioned that in A, B, and AB. So A and B. So there are 2 important things examiner has covered in terms of ISA 600, that what is the objective of ISA 600, right? So from the page number 1, what you should know. When you're reading this article, read the article, and if you just make it very particular for you, ease for you, on the page 1, you should read ISA 600 objective. What is the objective of ISA 600, right? So examiner has given you the objective of ISA 600 on the page number 1. So just read that out. That's one very important thing, right? Number 2, you move down on the page number 2 and you will see the very first heading of the examiner article, which is determining whether to act as a group auditor, as the auditor of the group financial statements or not. Determining whether to act as the auditor of the group financial statement. Decision. Uh, the group auditor has to decide whether he is willing to act as the group auditor or not. You are very familiar with an area of practice management in the AAA paper, where you get a question where you need to take a decision whether to accept the engagement or not. So a question on practice management asking you, how does a group auditor decides whether to act as a group auditor or not? So you should have a very strong knowledge on that, determining whether to act as the auditor of group or not. So you know there is a syllabus area. You come to the page number 2, and on the page number 2, you have a very important area, determining. Who is determining this? The group auditor. Determining whether to act as the auditor for the group financial statements. Now, this means you're taking a decision. You're taking a decision whether I should act as a group auditor or not. So determining whether to act. This is very important. Now, determining whether to act is a decision. That means the group auditor has to take a careful decision, to decide whether to act or not, And we know there is a syllabus area in the AAA, which is known as practice management. And the practice management syllabus area obviously expect from a AAA student that you should have an idea of how to take a decision. So please ensure that you read the page number 2 and you read the heading determining whether to act as the auditor of the group financial statement or not, and try to develop your notes by reading the page number 2. And you should have a careful notes in terms of determining whether to act as the auditor of the group financial statement or not. So develop your notes, right, by reading the page number 2. Okay, then moving on, let's see, is there something more important on the page number 2 which you should emphasize on? Okay, now examiner has given you a focus here as well, that what's the exam focus of determining whether to act as the auditor of the group financial statements or not. So you can just read through this exam focus, but there's one very important thing in this exam focus which I would like to do with you. In the para 3 of the exam focus on the page number 2, right? In the para 3 of the exam focus on page 2, there is one very important area which I would like to read and cover with you, which has come in the past paper, I think in the June 18 exam paper, where the examiner asked for a definition of a significant component. Now, when you read the para 3 here in front of your screen, it tells you ISA 600 provides guidance on what might constitute as a significant component. So ISA 600 is providing you the guidance on what might constitute as a significant component. And as a student of the AAA, you should know what constitutes a significant component. What constitutes a significant component? What constitutes a significant component? Now, this knowledge was already tested in the June 18 question number 1, and the June 18 question number 1 did test you on the knowledge of a significant component. But you should know what makes a component significant. So if there is a group and the group is having like 20 components, might be a subsidiary, might be an associate, whatever. Now, there are so big groups in the world, right? And the groups have so many components. Which component for the group auditor is a significant component? Which component for the group auditor is an important component? So let's find the definition if you are unaware of that. So the ISA 600 is providing guidance on what might constitute as a significant component. However, that guidance stresses that this is a matter of professional judgment. So even though the guidance in ISA 600 says that what constitute a significant component is a matter of professional judgment. Now, that's very difficult for a student to exercise an exam paper rather than a set of definite rules. So are there any rules? No. Is it a matter of a professional judgment? Yes. But having said that, the examiner tells a student after the full stop, the standard states that depending upon the nature and circumstances of the group, a group engagement team may decide to apply a percentage such as a 15% to an appropriate benchmark to identify components which are financially significant, for example, group assets, cash flows, profit, or turnover. Now, even though the examiner is saying that ISA 600 says it is a matter of a professional judgment and there are no rules for it, but examiner is telling you that in an exam paper, you may apply a threshold of 15% to decide whether the component is material, significant to a group or not. So this becomes very, very important statement. So I'm highlighting this in orange and I'm taking this to my Word file. Now, examiner is very critical of this, saying what constitutes a significant component. Let me just put that in emphasis for all of you. So what constitutes a significant component has been carefully put in by the examiner. And this is the knowledge which most of the students will be having because this is typically what every student have from even the book reading. The standard states that depending upon the nature and circumstances of the group engagement team may decide to apply a percentage such as 15%. And in the exam paper, we use it, right? 15% to an appropriate benchmark to identify components which are financially significant. So if there is a component in an exam paper and that component is 15% or more than 15% of the group assets or the group profit or the group turnover, you will consider that component as a significant component. So if a component in the exam paper is 15% or more, 15% or more than 15% of the group assets or of the group profit or of the group revenue, any one of them, you will consider it as a significant component. It will be considered as a significant component, right? So this is an easiest definition for you in exam paper. So what constitutes a significant component? And not a professional judgment, rather than a rule of a 15% in exam will help you. So that's one thing, right? The second thing, is there any qualitative aspect rather than 15%, which makes the component significant? What if the examiner has not given you numbers and you cannot determine the 15%? Are there any qualitative factors which helps you, enables you to pick this is a significant component? So are there any qualitative factors? Qualitative factors? Let's find that out as well. We go back to the examiner article, and the examiner says in the next paragraph, an example given of a significant component through specific circumstances might be a component responsible for international trading, which could expose the group to a significant foreign currency risk despite not otherwise being of financial significance to group. Now see what is the examiner telling us. The examiner is telling us in the para 4 that there might be some specific circumstances which might make the component important even though it's not of a financial significance. So examiner is saying uh, there might be some special circumstances given in the case study, special circumstances that makes the component significant, special circumstances that makes the component significant even though not financially significant. Even though it's not financially significant, you might find out the percentage and it's like 10%, and you say, oh no, this is not significant. But there might be a special circumstance which is making the component significant, even though it is not financially significant. So are we just looking at the financial significance? No, we're also looking at the special circumstances which can even make the component significant even though it's not financially significant. Now, one of the circumstances given by the examiner is that the component uh, trades internationally. The component trades internationally. So it's a foreign subsidiary. A lot of time you must have seen the past paper where the examiner says it's a foreign subsidiary. So the moment you say, oh, this is a foreign subsidiary, so it is important because it might give a risk of foreign currency exposure to the group. So uh, any foreign subsidiary in the context of a group question, a foreign subsidiary will become really important. More importantly, if the question says a new subsidiary was acquired during the year, even though that new subsidiary acquired during the year fails to meet the threshold of 15%, it will still be considered as important because it's a new subsidiary. Anything which is new is important, even though it's not meeting the threshold of 15%. Any subsidiary which is a foreign subsidiary will be considered as a very important subsidiary. So you just cannot put emphasis on 15% alone. There might be a special characteristic of a subsidiary, and that special characteristic of a subsidiary in the case will make it significant even though it is not meeting the threshold of 15%. So you should read the case very carefully for identifying special circumstances. And a new subsidiary is a very common phenomena in the AAA paper. A foreign subsidiary is a very common phenomena in the AAA paper. So please be very focused about your knowledge about what is a significant component from the para number 3 of exam focus on the page number 2. So that's one area, right? Now you move down. So I have read some paragraphs with you, page number 2. So page number 2 sounds very important in terms of exam focus. I've already highlighted that in orange. The heading number 1, determining whether to act as the auditor of the group financial statement, is an important heading which you should read out. Okay, then the rest of the page number 2 is not important. You come to the page number 2 bottom, and on the bottom of the page number 2, you find the next heading, communication with the component auditor. And this to me is very, very important. This to me is very, very important. On the page number 2, you will find another heading, which is communication with the component auditor. So again, on the page 2, you will find the next heading, and the next heading this time is communication with the communication with the component auditor. Now, this is a very important. How does the group auditor communicates with the component auditor? Is there any mechanism? Is there any way out? What sort of communication should take place between the component auditor and the group auditor? So, if we just make some questions, communication with the group auditor, when and how does a group auditor communicates? Number one. The second question, uh, examples of matters on which the group auditor communicates with component auditor. So when and how does a group auditor communicate? At the planning stage, during the audit, when? Examples of matters. On which matters do you communicate? Is there any list of matters given by ISO 600? The answer is yes. So for both these questions, you will find the answer on the page number 2 when you read this heading, communication with component auditor. Let's find out that. Now, when you read through this, examiner is giving you examples, right, of methods which you should communicate. Right over here, right? Such communication is required to set out. So examiner is giving you examples of the communications. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see the bullets, right? So such communication is required to set out, and you have 4 bullets. Then the examiner is telling you here the component auditor is required to confirm that they will cooperate with the group engagement team and provide information on a timely basis. This is very, very important, that the component auditor is required to confirm that they will cooperate with the group auditor. So that's one very important thing. If I can just put them down in bullets here, some of the important things which I believe is important, and you should have a knowledge of that, and we should not skip them out. Even though my purpose is not to read the article with you, it's just to give you a guidance, but still, if there is something important, I should shed light on that. The very first thing in communication with component auditor, it is the component auditor, right, is required to confirm that they will cooperate with the group team and provide information on a timely basis. So this is very, very important, right? Number one. Number two, what sort of communication? The information expected to be provided to the group engagement team by the component auditor includes all this. See, the examiner has given you examples of the communication that should take place between the group engagement team and the component auditor. This has been covered here in a very good manner by the examiner. So let's put that all in orange. So what if the examiner asks you a question in the December 20 exams of the type of communications that should take place between the group auditor and the component auditor? So are there any examples of matters? Information. Let's put it here. Next bullet. Okay, so I'm just reading from the screen in front of you, right? The information expected to be provided to the group team by the component auditor includes confirmation of their compliance with the group auditor requirement and ethical standards, any non-compliance with laws and regulations, uncorrected misstatements, indicator of possible management bias, description of any significant deficiencies in internal control, other significant matters as those they expect to communicate to those charged with governance, and the overall finding of the audit. So a lot of things, right? You need to communicate to the group auditor any ethical issues, any possible indicators of management bias, any important issues which arose during the course of the audit of a component, any matters which you must have communicated to those charged with governance, any significant deficiencies arising in the component, and the overall audit opinion and conclusion. So examiner has given you like 7 bullets of the information expected to be provided. So please ensure that you cover those 7 bullets, right? Just 1 minute. The information to be provided by the component auditor to group auditor. Examiner has given 7 examples. Examples has been given by examiner on bottom of page 2, on bottom of page 2, and are in total 7. So 7 areas where the group auditor and the component auditor should communicate, but please ensure that you revise that list of 7 communications for your exam paper. So you should have a knowledge about the communication with component auditor from the page number 2. You should know how they communicate, when they communicate, and on what matters they communicate. This is a very journal easy reading page. You move down from this page and you come to the last heading of the article. Just at the bottom of the page 2, you will see the last heading of the article, which is obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence regarding the component and the consolidation process. So how would the group auditor assure that he has obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence regarding the component and the consolidation process? So that would be the last heading. So just at the end of page 2 and then on the page 3 and page 4, you will find the last heading of the article is how does a group auditor gathers sufficient appropriate audit evidence about component before he wraps up the group audit and the consolidation process. So 2 things, right? And the consolidation process. Now, to me, in this overall heading, last heading, what is important? So how does the group auditor gather sufficient appropriate audit evidence about the component and the consolidation process? The first thing, what you should know from here is the procedures on consolidation. Procedures on consolidation to be performed by the group auditor. So if there is a journal question, I think which came way back in June 11 exams, very old exams, where the examiner directly asked for the procedures on consolidation. So if the examiner asks you, what are procedures on consolidation to be performed by the group auditor, 6 marks, how will you write them? They're given in the article. Procedures on consolidation to be performed by the group auditor. That is one very important thing from the last heading. And you can see this on the page number 3, page number 4, page number 3 bottom, the types of audit procedures. The types of audit procedures is there on the page number 3 bottom. So at the bottom of the page number 3, you will see the procedures in bullets. So I'm just writing here. This is on the bottom of page 3. Bottom of page 3. So please ensure you know the procedures, right? Which should be performed by the group auditor. Now, just before I move on to the procedures and give you a very good knowledge on procedures, I just want to go through these pages I left. Obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence regarding the components. Stage number 1, gathering evidence on component. So you gather evidence on components at the stage of planning and risk assessment when you're obtaining the knowledge of business. So at the stage of knowledge of business, planning stage, the group auditor should spend a lot of time in understanding the structure of the group, in understanding the components of the group, in understanding the accounting policies of the group and its components. So a plenty of time should be spent because you're not doing planning of a single company, you are doing planning of the group. So when you're doing planning of the group, you should take sufficient knowledge of the group structure, the components of the group. You should take understanding of the significant components of the group. You should take understandings of which components are foreign subsidiaries, how many new subsidiaries have been added during the year. You should take knowledge about There are different accounting policies, if any, used in the group, different year ends. Are there any subsidiaries who have a different year end than that of the group? So you should identify a lot of knowledge about the group at the stage of planning and risk assessment. So please do read that out. Stage number 1 is gathering evidence on the component. Involvement in the work of the component auditor. How do you get involved in the work of component auditor? What is the extent of involvement? Do you review the working papers of the component auditor? Do you don't review the working papers of the component auditor? What sort of involvement the group auditor will have in the work of the component auditor? Please do read this heading so that you know exactly what sort of involvement the group auditor have in the work of the component auditor. So when you look at the stage number 1, you should know how you gather evidence on the components through the planning and risk assessment process, and what sort of involvement will you have in the work of the component auditor. Again, when you are reading this, keep a page with you and try noting the important points down carefully. Then at the stage 2, that is the consolidation, you do the audit of consolidation. Now, as a group auditor, at the stage number 2, when you have gathered knowledge about the group and its component and the structure and the accounting policies and everything, at stage 2, when you get to the consolidation process, you should ensure that how you wrap up the consolidation process. And this is the time when you should know the procedures on consolidation, right? And lastly, at the stage number 3, this is the only 2 stages, right? And then the examiner moves on towards the conclusion of the article. And again, at the end of the article, the examiner again has given you the exam focus of the overall group audit from an examination perspective. Now, if I just wrap up my discussion and give you a very good focus on the audit procedures, that means that when we are reading this article as a student, right, on the page number 1 of the article, you should read the objectives of ISO 600 given by the examiner. So you should know the objectives. On the page number 2, you should read the heading, which is determining whether to act as the auditor of the group financial statement or not, and develop your notes. Then in the para 3 of the exam focus on the page number 2, you should know what constitutes a significant component, which I've just given emphasis on. Then on the page 2, at the end of the page 2, you will find the next heading, communication with the component auditor. You should know when and how does a group auditor communicates, and examples of the communication that takes place between the group auditor and the component auditor, which has been given by the examiner. And the total 7 types of communications, right? Examples of communication. Then at the end of the page 2, and then the whole page 3 and the whole page 4 is how does a group auditor gather sufficient appropriate audit evidence and the consolidation process. The examiner has covered 2 very important aspects here. Number 1, the stage 1, and number 2, the stage 2. So examiner has given us 2 stages of how does the auditor gather sufficient appropriate audit evidence. At the stage 1, the examiner is just telling us how the group auditor obtains knowledge about the group and its structure and the involvement in the work of component auditor. So that is all what you will get from the stage number 1. In the stage number 2, you will get to know the consolidation process and how does the group auditor gets into the consolidation process. So please read the stage 1, make your notes, read the stage 2 and make your notes, right? The very, very important thing which I believe from this particular area is the procedures, because examiner is very fond of asking procedures. So you should know the procedures very well. So I will be covering them in just towards the end of my presentation today. So I would rate procedures as very, very important. Okay, now let's go wrap up this discussion on this article. Finally, moving back to my presentation, I've put the procedures on my presentation from the examiner article, and they're so easy procedures. You are a group auditor, right? And as a group auditor, you need to perform the audit of the parent financial statement. And as a group auditor, you need to perform audit of the consolidation as well. So you have an extra responsibility. Now, When the group auditor gets involved in the consolidation process, how you go about it? What procedures as a group auditor will you perform to assure that the consolidation process has been rightly carried out by the management of the group? I have made a mnemonic for the audit procedures, which you can see at the start of the screen: FCDTC. That means there are 5 procedures. FCDTC. The very first procedure, which the examiner is telling us, is confirming that the figures F, confirming that the figures taken into the consolidation have been accurately extracted from the financial statements of the components and that all components are included. So you need to confirm that the figures coming in the consolidation are coming from the individual financial statements of the components and no component has been omitted. So confirming the figures. So F is the figure. Number 2 procedure, evaluating the classification of the components of the group. That has the management done the right classifications of the component, like a subsidiary, like a joint venture, like a associate. So evaluate the classifications of the components. Have they done the right classification? So F for the figures, C for the classifications. Next, review the disclosures necessary in the group financial statements, such as the related party transactions and minority interest. So have you included the related party transactions disclosures in the group financial statement? So review the disclosure. So D is for disclosures, C is for classification, F is for figures. Fourth, investigate the treatment of the components which have different financial year-ends or different accounting policies from the rest of the group. Investigate the treatment. Investigate, has the management done the right treatment of those components who have a different year end? Has the management done the right accounting treatment of those components who have accounting policies different from the rest of the group? So look at the screen in front of you. As a group auditor, you will first confirm F, the figures, that the figures taken in the consolidation are accurate. Number 2, you will confirm the C, the classification. You will confirm that the classifications of the components are right. Number 3, you will confirm the D, the disclosures in the group financial statement. Number 4, you will confirm the treatment, particularly the treatment of those components who have a different year end or have different accounting policies. And number 5 is another C, which is on the next screen, gathering evidence about appropriate to the specific consolidation adjustments. Have the management done the consolidation adjustments? Has the management carried out the right consolidation adjustments? Like, have they done the calculation of the goodwill and the impairment review? Number 1, consolidation adjustment. So have they calculated the goodwill and have they determined the impairment review? Number 1. Have they cancelled all the intra-company balances and transactions? Number 2. Have they made the provision for the unrealized profit as a result of the intra-group transactions? Number 3, have they done the fair value adjustments needed for the assets and liabilities held by the component? And number 5, retranslation of the financial statement of a component denominated in a foreign currency. So when you are finalizing the consolidation, the group auditor should ensure that the management of the group has done the adjustments to the consolidation, adjustments for goodwill, impairment review, adjustments for the cancellation of the intra-group balances, the unrealized profit, the fair value adjustments, and the retranslation if there is any foreign subsidiary. So 5 procedures. Remember the mnemonic. F, figures, C, classification, D, disclosure, T, treatment, and C, the consolidation adjustments. How many consolidation adjustments is the group auditor looking at? 5 consolidation adjustments. So that sorry, that's so simple to understand, right? Mind map for audit procedures. Now, when you look at the audit procedures, it's so simple to learn them. Figures, as a group auditor, you will first assure that the figures in the consolidation are accurate and they're coming from the individual financial statements of the component. Number 2, you will look at the classification, that the management has rightly classified each of the component, be it a subsidiary, be it an associate, be it a joint venture. You will look for the disclosures, particularly the related party disclosures in the group financial statements. You will look at the treatments, that if any subsidiary has a different year end or a different accounting policies, how have they been treated? And finally, you will look at the consolidation adjustments, the 5 consolidation adjustments. All the 5 consolidation adjustments can become 5 more procedures. So you can break consolidation adjustments into multiple procedures, right? See this. The calculation of the goodwill and impairment review can be one procedure. Cancellation of intracompany balances and transaction can be one procedure. Provision for unrealized profit, one procedure. Fair value adjustments, one. And retranslation, one. You can break the consolidation adjustments into 5 procedures. So if you get to write 5 procedures, then just focus on the 5 in front of your screen here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you get to write more than 5, you can break many procedures from gathering evidence appropriate to specific consolidation adjustments. Please ensure you're very good on procedures and you know these procedures. And remember the mnemonic of the procedures, FCDTC, and that will give you very good confidence for December exams. More importantly, please ensure that you've covered all the 3 headings of the article. Heading number 1, determining whether to act as the auditor of the group financial statements or not. Communication with the component auditor and obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Even do remember what is a significant component. Please ensure you read the article, keep a page with you, develop your notes of every important point you come across. Again, I'm just emphasizing again and again on the same thing, that you just need 90 minutes max to complete this article. Keep a pen and a paper with you and note down the important points. And my presentation perhaps will just give you the structure, the outlines in which you need to fill in the color. So at some places, I've just given you the way to read, the outlines, the mechanism, how things have been tested in the past paper. But I hope my presentation will give you the outline, and this outline will help you in developing your own perspective about group audit. But again, the emphasizable point is this is not a new subject area. This is an area which has been coming in the past papers over the last many years and has been a very popular area with your examiner. So that is it from this presentation on group audit. To make you realize the importance of this topic, the importance of this article, so that you can spend time on it, develop your own notes, and be perfect in this area. I will be sharing this presentation slides with you so that you can develop your notes, and the Word file I have used during the course of my presentation today, I will also be sharing that Word file with you so that you can take a printout of that and then start reading the article. Okay, thank you very much for being part of this a bit prolonged presentation, but there was so much to discuss around this, so I thought I should put a proper emphasis rather than just rushing through the presentation. Have a nice day, all of you, and I wish you all success for your upcoming exams in December 2020 or onwards in 2021, whenever you're appearing for the triple exams. It's your tutor Kashif Kamran signing off from this presentation on the recent article Group Audit. Goodbye.